Good afternoon and welcome to the Cybersecurity Uncles. Goodness me, I can almost remember what we're doing. I'm Uncle Stevie.
And I'm Uncle Rich. Good afternoon.
So Rich, what have we got this time?
So, got a good question come in this time, and it goes as follows. As the head of our IT department, I'm constantly getting pushback from the development team about our security protocols being too restrictive. How can we find a middle ground that keeps our systems secure without stifling innovation and making our developers' jobs harder?
Ooh, that's a good question. Hmm.
Yeah, it is, and it's a difficult one. And it doesn't just apply to development teams, of course. Anyone that uses essentially a computer in your business might have that same feeling. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right.
So I think if we throw it out in broader terms, how does your organization get to do what it wants to do without tripping over cybersecurity?
I mean, cybersecurity is meant to be an enabler of secure business rather than being the department of no.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's not helped that there are a few overzealous practitioners out there who do like to say no a lot.
Yeah, that's true. And that comes back down to understanding business risk and aligning your cyber risk and your business risk properly. Because quite often the no is based on a cyber risk rather than a business risk.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, um, the the business can choose to accept cyber risks. I'm not saying they should, but I'm saying they can choose to.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'd agree with that. Although you've got to be careful with risk acceptance. You have to have a reasonably mature risk process in a business for that to work properly. And what I have seen is kind of the equivalent of the risk committee passing up to the board the risks and the board signing them off with the attitude that, yes, we agree that the CISO owns that risk.
yeah, absolutely. And then there's some companies that just don't really think about risk too much and just go, "Oh, you mentioned the word risk, but it doesn't sound like a big deal. Let's just ignore it. Do what you want."
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, having made the assumption that the risk process works in this particular organization, I guess one of the things to think about would be the point at which security is engaged in the development process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't see, assuming that this is an agile sort of company, and 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 that presumably they don't treat it like a religion, unlike some. There should be some flexibility to be a bit creative around the security on these things. Hopefully, they've got their secure development life cycle policies in place, so they know where they're at, and it might be something as simple as the developers just don't particularly like it. I'm hoping they're not in a position where they don't have a secure development lifecycle policy in place, and they're just trying to shoehorn in security, sort of almost after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in a lot of organizations, doesn't it? That almost the first that security gets to hear about something is when it's just about to go live.
Yeah, and then everybody gets upset when you have to wait for pen testers and code reviews.
Yeah, exactly, and that comes down partly to making sure that security is part of the KPIs for the development team. Where it isn't, and they're targeted on features and turnaround times, faults in service, that kind of thing. The pressure is to get something coded and get it out there, not to spend time checking that it's secure at the end of the process. So, I would have thought that a couple of areas that are good to consider in this situation would be, firstly, having KPIs for the developers that include metrics around vulnerabilities identified um, prior to go live, and also to then try and engage the security team earlier in the life cycle. I mean, the whole thing about DevSecOps, um, a few years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, DevSecOps was seen as the solution to all problems, which it wasn't, but it was a good step in the right direction, so long as it was used as a methodology and rather than as it was in a lot of organisations, it just became yet another role that sat somewhere in either the development team, i.e., didn't do security, or the security team, i.e., didn't do development. But if you've got the culture of dealing with security issues early, that makes takes away a lot of the stress around this thing's ready to go. The CEO's expecting it to be live on Monday. What do you mean it's Friday and we've got to get it pen tested?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the developer ecosystem, for want of a better phrase, is very well served with automated testing tools. I mean, our development team use automated testing tools all the time, and there's no reason
Yeah.
why you shouldn't expand upon those tests performed to include security things, items.
Yeah. I mean, I would see that there is no reason why you shouldn't be doing that sort of stuff. There's plenty of both static and dynamic code testing that can be done as part of the development lifecycle. It doesn't have to wait to a particular point and then get handed over to people to be tested. There's lots of stuff that could be done. And encouraging secure coding practices is never a bad thing anyway. Um, you would hope that whoever this person is isn't just coming up with random stuff at the end and is actually trying to pick up some genuine issues that should have been addressed earlier on. In which case, then, yeah, using what automated tooling's available early in the process is better, again, than kind of waiting till the end and delaying things.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect to see much pushback from developers. I mean, if they're the sort of developers that are willing to annotate their code and take the time to do that, then surely they're the sort of developers who would also have enough care in their craft to maybe read a bit about secure coding and apply some of that.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is not, it's not rocket science, and it's been around for a long time. If you look at the OWASP top 10, it's been through a few iterations, but it really doesn't change much.
No,
And if you've covered off the OWASP top 10, you are well on the way to having something that's going to be secure once it's live.
yeah, absolutely. And to me, it's little more really than quality assurance. You know, when you're security testing your code, all you're doing really is checking that yes, obviously it's secure, but you're checking that the quality of your code is good enough to be secure.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some of the issue lies with company culture, though,
Yeah,
and company culture cascades from the top of an organisation much more effectively than most people realise it does. So, if you're in an organisation where the culture is just code it up quick and get it out there, you may be on a hiding to nothing.
yeah. Sometimes these are very big ships to turn around. In all fairness,
Yeah, somebody senior enough to have some influence needs to see this as a problem, and needs to want to do something about it. Um, so that isn't always the easiest challenge to overcome.
well, yeah, it's very hard to put a figure on a breach you've not had.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, as an industry, we're really rubbish at this. We huge figures of money lost per breach or whatever, and I would say that the vast majority of companies figures and go, well, that doesn't make sense to me. But then that comes back around risk again, doesn't it? And like we've said, various times before, all risks ultimately are financial risks from a business
Yeah,
perspective. Well, not all risks. You might have risk of somebody dying on an operating table or whatever it might be, but the vast majority of corporate risks can be articulated in terms of finance. So understanding the financial risks associated with your cyber risks kind of is that's the other side of the business risk. The business risk is a financial risk. Cyber risk needs to be seen in the context of that business risk. So somebody in the organization probably does understand what the financial impacts would be if certain things happened. It's probable, though, that nobody's ever asked them the questions. What would happen, let's say, if our website was down for a day because it was compromised and taken offline? If you happen to be doing, if you're based around e-trading one way or another, that could be really, really significant. If the website's just information delivery, the hit's more to reputation than direct financial hit. But you've got to think about what's the long-term hit on the reputation, and how does that affect the potential for customers doing business with you, existing customers renewing, getting new customers, that sort of thing. So the financial risks are out there, but you need to ask somebody, probably the CFO, the right questions in order to be able to then say, well, if you release this and this happens, this is what the company is going to suffer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does sort of lean into that question around maturity.
Yeah.
Because I note that in this question, the questions come from a head of IT that has a development team reporting into them. And quite often, you'll find that a development team would actually end up reporting via team leads, lead engineers, whatever, into a CTO. So in this case, it might be that the business isn't quite there yet in terms of maturity, especially around security.
Yeah, that could well be true, but then that's also an opportunity as well as a risk. So if the business can grapple with this now and understand how to address it at this point, as they grow and mature, I'm kind of making the assumption it's a growing, maturing business, but given, as you say, the people involved in this, you're probably right. But as they mature, they then want to they want to have in place the processes that will allow them to take the next step or the step after that, rather than kind of running to catch up. And it was one of the things that we've worked quite hard on, haven't we, Rich, in that security company, that as we've grown over the last 5 years, we've developed a whole load of processes which are the ones not only that we need now, but they're kind of the ones that we need to take the next step. So it's a good opportunity, so long as somebody senior enough to enact on that is going to understand it and do something about it.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding is really key, because right now this person might be talking about a philosophical problem with their teams not wanting to take on secure coding practices and something as ephemeral as risk, which might be considered in their organization as just one person's opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a tricky one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the end, though, if you, well, you've still got this problem then around the way in which the organisation is structured. So if if the head of IT has the ability to focus people through KPIs and objectives, bonuses, whatever else it might be, then it would be possible to fix that within the department. If,
Yeah,
though, in some way there's another kind of reporting structure which would prevent the head of IT from being able to set KPIs for developers, that's going to be really difficult, and would have to go up to the at whatever point those two parts of the organization join, and hopefully that person understands risk enough to be able to make a sensible decision about what to do.
yeah. I mean, there is also another alternative that's just sprung to mind, and it's kind of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, really. If you cannot embed security into the mindset and development process of the developers, what you can do, if you're running in agile sprints, next major release doesn't go live without being pen tested. Okay. Sprint after that, you dedicate to squashing these security holes, filling those gaps, and you force the issue that way by dedicating an entire sprint cycle to it.
Yeah, I mean that's great. Again, though, you've got to be in a position where you can determine what goes in the sprints.
Yeah, yeah. This
So
head of IT's got to be in control of something.
yeah, and um, without knowing how what the target operating model is for this organisation, it's difficult to say emphatically. But those are all things that could be done. So if there are existing problems, then yeah, having a sprint to deal with those would be, I would have said, a very good way to do it. If, however, the business has agreed to a whole load of release cycle stuff that doesn't allow you to do that, that again is going to be pretty challenging.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole thing around embedding a security culture in teams in a business is it's very hard. Human beings are creatures of habit. It's very hard to
Yes.
break or change habits. So really, it is a case of taking it as high as you can, but also keep repeating yourself. Keep saying these are the requirements. These are my requirements. I want it done this way,
Yeah.
and people will 9 times out of 10 eventually fall in line. Once they
Yeah.
realize that this is an ongoing requirement, it's not going to go away. It's not just a one-off thing. People do, by and large, start to toe the line. Some more successfully than others, admittedly, but um, I,
Yeah.
I think obviously the security landscape's constantly shifting. There's new threats, new threat groups, new malware, new viruses all the time. So it is something that has to be continuously applied anyway. So I would say it's very much a case of you just make a start and just try and chip away at this whole. Um, I've lost my words. I do apologise. Chip away at the whole ethos of it and the whole culture of around security within the team.
Yeah. Actually, you raised a really good point there that it is generally possible to define requirements from a security perspective in exactly the same way as you can define functional and non-functional requirements for any development project. So perhaps something to look at would be to find a path in at the beginning that sets out what the security requirements are, and probably best to focus on the really basic stuff to begin with. If there's no culture of secure coding, focus on the basic stuff to begin with, and then mature the requirements as established working process takes that stuff on board.
Yeah, because the developers might even find that they're in the thick of security practices without even realizing it. If you've just popped
Yeah,
the odd bit into a sprint here and there,
yeah, exactly. Again, everybody works better if they know what the outcomes are meant to be. And if nobody has said that as part of this process, this sort of testing is going to be done, well, you turn that round and you say, well, okay, what are you testing for? Well, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, blah blah blah, all the usual, well, the top 10, as it were. If it's clear at the beginning that you need to have developed web apps that aren't susceptible to cross-site scripting, say, your developers will avoid leaving any of that in, if you see what I mean. So that it becomes, it isn't so much that cross-site scripting is one that I think it would be difficult to argue that any developers these days, or certainly developers of web apps these days, are unaware of it. It just may not be in the focus, like the forefront of their minds.
yeah,
And nobody deliberately leaves insecure code sat in a web app. It's crept in through nobody being focused on making sure it doesn't creep in.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that probably answers that question. I'm
Yeah,
just going to quickly buzz through the question again. So the key points are they're constantly getting pushback about restrictive security protocols. They're looking for a middle ground and don't want to stifle innovation. Yeah, I think we've probably covered several soft and several sort of hard ways of getting this done.
yeah, I'd agree with that. And yeah, so some of it's culture, some of it's around defining requirements properly, some of it's about risk management and maturity of the organisation. I don't think there's much more that can be done, really.
No, I don't. Well, I hope that helps the person that asked the question. If you're out there listening today, uh, absolutely feel free to get in touch once you've tried a few things, and we'll talk about it on another episode of Cybersecurity Agony Uncles.
Yep, love some feedback. So thanks for listening, and it's goodbye from me.